Great. All right. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And this is a seminar that we announced on TriNet, jointly organized by Annals of Tourism Research and Tourism Management. We're happy to see there are close to 50 people in the audience, but actually in the record, we have approaching 400 people registered. So it's a wonderful thing to see. The topic today is on registered reports. The new submission option introduced by both journals, Annals of Tourism Research and Tourism Management, and obviously other hospitality and tourism journals have also introduced this. But we're doing this because we have the same submission system, so we thought it would be a good idea to provide an overview of it. So the flow of the activity today is we will first have Robert and Sarah. Robert will be representing tourism management in terms of any Q&A later. And obviously, Sarah is in charge of the Annals of Tourism Research. So Robert will give a brief introduction of the whys. Why should we choose this option? And then Sarah will follow up with the how. How can we submit? And also we will explain the review process. But the bulk of the time for today will be on Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and that will be the best part, right? If you have any concerns, queries, uncertainty, that will be the perfect time. So when we do the Q&A, please do turn on your camera. Obviously, when they do the screen share, your image will be very small, but when we finish the presentation, then please turn on your camera so that we can have a face-to-face dialogue. And I will remain in the audience because Robert will be coordinating all the submissions under this track to tourism management. So let's get started. And maybe Sarah, you want to share the slides, please?
Absolutely. Let me just find them. I think this is it. Did it work? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay. Good. I'm going to hand over to, I'm going to be the clicker, but we will start with Robert. Go, Robert.
Sure. Thanks, Cassie and Sarah. Before we get started, let me throw some numbers out there. Sarah, please.
Wait a minute. I'm having difficulties. Here. There we go.
Okay. This is a test of Sarah's technology skills.
Click the button.
So first of all, I'm going to bombard you with a lot of numbers here. So this is a 2015 science paper from psychology. So basically, this group conducted 100 studies from the 3 psychology journals and conducted replication of that and find that the replication effect size were half as large as the original findings. And 97% of the original studies of that 100 studies reported significant results, but only 36% of them, of the replications report the same significant results. Next one is from cancer biology. This is a study the researchers in 2021, the researchers reported that combining original positive and null effects for each of the 5 criteria, the replication success rates were 47% for the same direction and statistic significance for the replication studies they conducted. Next one. This is a very impactful Nature's survey. They surveyed about 1,600 scientists, and the results is that more than 70% of the researchers have tried and failed to reproduce another scientist's experiments, and more than half have failed to reproduce their own experiments. And the next one is very recent. It's the beginning of this year in biomedicine. Basically, kind of repeats the same approach as the Nature study. And when asked whether there was a reproducibility crisis in biomedicine, about 72% of the experts responded, yes, there is a reproducibility crisis out there. So if you recall from the Philosophy of Science 101, we all probably recall that one of the key criteria for science is it should be intersubjectively replicable. So we are facing, across different disciplines in the scientific community, we're facing a replication crisis. And part of the problem, at least according to some of the researchers, is that the journals tend to publish positive results in support of some novel hypotheses rather than negative results that are insignificant. So this has been again and again shown in different disciplines and in the past 10-ish years, which is alarming. Next slide, please. So the next, the question here is, how should we collectively as the scientists and members of the scientific community deal with this replication crisis? And people came up with different solutions. And one of the solutions is the pre-registration. And one of the pre-registration format is called register report, which is the focus of this discussion today. Very quickly, the idea of register report is basically it's undergoes two-stage peer review. So in the first stage, researchers submit their detailed research plan that would include their literature review, their hypothesis, their questions, their plan, their methods, and then submit to the journal without any results. And the reviewers will go through the whole proposal, the plan, and judge the quality of the idea. And then if the review results is favorable, then the journal basically is committed to publish the paper regardless of the results, as long as you adhere to your research plan. And then in the second stage, when the researchers, when the authors conduct the research and have the results and report the findings and discuss the implications, they submit to the journal. And if, as long as they adhere to the original plan, then they will be accepted. So this whole idea basically kind of addressed some of the previous problems that we discussed about, like because the journals, the editors, the reviewers tend to favor significant results, then there is a great deal of publication bias, which force and kind of, that's kind of a call for some kind of different questionable research practices, and some of them unethical research practices. And the idea of register report allowed researchers to take higher risks and be more innovative. It also kind of required everybody to have a meticulous pre-plan before you collect the data and conduct the analysis. And finally, it promotes the transparency and allows everybody to regain the confidence and regain the trust of the scientific community. With there, and I will send back to Sarah, please.
All right, thanks, Robert. So now let's have a look at how this works. Robert's already briefly described it. So we have a stage 1 and a stage 2 submission process. So stage 1, you submit the manuscript as registered report stage 1 and with a cover letter. And here's what it needs to contain. How will it answer an important question? So this is really important, right? You can't come with something that's boring. The same criteria apply that always apply when you submit something. So it's got to be an exciting question. It's got to be an exciting gap in knowledge. How will you contribute to knowledge or to methodology? what has been done before. So you still write a literature review where you elaborate why the question you're asking really needs to be asked and hasn't been answered yet. And then, and that's the key bit, you explain exactly how you will investigate it. So it's got to be an unambiguous research design. It's not sufficient to say, I'm going to run an experiment. I'm going to run a survey study. Everything, sample size, where is it going to be collected? What is the questionnaire? The full methodology has to be included at this stage. Then what happens is it goes to either an editor or an associate editor, depends how it works. So I think for tourism management, it'll go to Robert. For Annals, it's going to go to me. And Robert and I will send it out for review. Well, we might desk reject it, but if we choose to send it out, it goes out to review. And this bit is actually what you already know. That's the traditional review part. So these reviewers will assess whether that's really a significant question at all, whether it matters, right? And whether you're across the literature and whether the methodology is capable of answering your question. Let's say they all say yes. You then publish the first stage registered report, and you get a DOI for that first stage registered report. Then you go away and you do the actual field work, right? Now, what we didn't say at the start, but I'll sneak it in here. This is only good for empirical papers, right? There is no registered report for conceptual papers. There is no registered report for qualitative research, okay? This is quantitative empirical work we're talking about. Then you go and you submit stage 2 manuscript with a cover letter. Now here, all that happens is we're checking whether you've done what you've promised. So it'll include all of stage 1 plus the results, the discussion, the conclusion. All right? Again, it comes to Robert or me. Now, if you have complied with everything you've done, that's the end of it. We don't even send it out to the reviewers anymore, and we just do an adherence review. So we check, have you done the right sample size? Have you done exactly what you promised? And as Robert said, the beauty now is if your result is insignificant, that is not a reason for us to reject. So irrespective of what you find, as long as the methodology is correct and adhered to, that second part is published, and that gets published and then linked. So it gets, the DOIs get linked, so it then forms one paper. So this is how it actually looks in our wonderful submission system. I'm being highly cynical. We know it's not great, but that is outside of our realm of what we can change. So literally, when you go into tourism management or Annals' submission interface, this is the article type, registered report stage 1. That's what you click. And then you can already see my acceptance will be published. I will have to contact blah, 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 share new data. I have to inform if I decide not to continue with stage 2. And then this is also a good one. They do want to know approximately when you're going to do it, right? So you can't publish a stage 1 and then 10 years later you decide you've now collected the data. So there has to be kind of a speedy follow-up with the second stage. Oh, okay. Then you've done the second stage and you submit as registered report stage 2. And you will then be asked a few questions. So you should only do that if one has been accepted, right? Otherwise, there's no point submitting. And you need to link the DOI, right? So you need to put in what was the DOI for your stage 1 paper so that Elsevier can link it together. And then here you are confirming, but obviously that's going to be thoroughly checked. Here you are confirming that you've actually adhered, that you have not deviated from the method as you promised it in stage 1. Now, there's detailed guidelines, which you can find here, but they do pretty much say the same thing, right? The important thing is that in this first stage, it's all about the pitch. You're saying, why does it matter? Why has it not been done? And this is how I'm going to investigate it. In the second stage, it's all about the report, the correct drawing of conclusions from the data you've collected, and the guarantee and the confidence that you have actually done what you've promised. All right, I already said that it's all about adherence. This is really important. If you deviate from what you have promised, it's a rejection. right? So this is really important to understand. So you can't say, well, Annals love or tourism management loved the idea, and I did promise a field experiment, but it was just too hard, so I ran a survey experiment. Well, sorry, right? That's a different paper. So whatever you've committed to needs to happen, otherwise it's basically an automatic rejection. Now, there's the million-dollar question. Is it easier for authors? We don't know, because neither tourism management nor Annals has processed these. But my prediction is I have submitted one, a registered report, and I found it a lot more tedious than putting in a normal paper. So I think it's not going to be easier for you to do that, because if I assess a paper that's finished, a traditional paper, I do exactly what I will do at stage 1. I look if the problem matters, I look if you're across the literature, and I look at the method. And I would say 90% of my desk rejections are the method is not appropriate. All right? So that problem's not going to change if you write a registered report. So basically, it really forces you to think hard about how you want to present that methodology to get through that stage 1. Yeah, and then you still need to deliver. So it doesn't help you to say, oh, yes, we're just going to run field experiments in 300 theme parks across the world, because you need to deliver. And if you can't deliver, then, the whole thing comes crashing down as well. All right, and back to Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. For most of us, even though the idea of register reports seems to be novel and new, but it's actually very similar to pretty much everybody has done is a dissertation defense, right? A proposal is being submitted and being evaluated, and then finally you collected the data and defend your dissertation. This is a two-stage of a dissertation project, and the same idea here. So if you ask whether it's kind of a different task for reviewers, well, the most important difference is that there are going to be 2 rounds of reviews, technically. One is the first round is the pre-results round, that after data, that's the traditional review. Usually we review the entire paper, which has collected the data, has conducted analysis, but in the register report, it's a 2-stage one. And the focus of the review is actually pretty different. The traditional review, as most of us who have review experiences, if you may recall that, well, one of the first things you see, the results and whether it's novel, whether it's significant. But in a register report review, the first stage, the entire focus will be on the quality of the idea, the research questions, the rigor of the methods, and the protocol. And then after that, the second phase will be focusing on the, where you adhere to the protocol and whether you discuss the findings, in an interesting way. And talking about bias, there's always going to be some bias in this process, but it will be, sufficient to say that traditional reviews, we tend to be biased towards, as I mentioned, towards positive and significant results, while in the registry reports case, because of the very setup, it's most likely going to reduce that part of the bias. And in the traditional review, we do not usually talk about deviation because we don't know. That's a black box of how you started the research plan and then how you follow through that. But in the register report, there is a very clear process of that. So because of that, the register report tend to be substantially increase the transparency, and which is the beauty of it. And also, as Sarah mentioned, it could be the more tedious part of that. Yeah. I guess that's about it, right, Sarah?
All right, we're moving on to Q&A.
Slides.
But I will stop sharing because I want to see your faces when you ask questions. But we can always go back to the slides if someone wants to refer to the slides. All right, over to you guys. Don't be shy. You've got all 3 of us here to answer your questions. Don't waste that opportunity. Please ask.
We will appreciate if you turn on your camera.
All right, that's fair enough. You don't have to turn it on if you're either on the bus or on the toilet. Okay, that's the 2 exceptions. So, Professor Sarah, I would like to clarify a point from your presentation. You mentioned that registered reports are suitable for quant empirical, but not for qual. Recently, there's been a debate in tourism management regarding whether also to qual. Just to confirm, does not accept. No, we do not. I'd also like to direct the same question to tourism management. Yeah, we've had that conversation with Scott, and we have concluded that it is just not useful, right? Basically, if you think about stage one, if you're a qualitative researcher, you're going to say, I'm going to run 20 interviews with hotel managers. Well, that's it, right? So that's it's just not, we don't believe that it's a useful thing, because all the value of the almost method is in the result analysis. Yeah. So we can't judge that at stage one, but I'll pass over to tourism management. Maybe you have different views and we can learn from you, Robert and Kat.
I suppose that this is referring to one of the papers that I was part of it. Yes, indeed, that the tourism management paper we wrote is about pre-registration in general. That would include qualitative research. Qualitative research can be pre-registered, but we are talking about register report, a special kind of pre-registration. So usually for register report in this particular category, only quantitative empirical papers will be applicable. It makes more sense to do that.
Any more questions? No problem, Valerio.
I have one question.
Yes, Mona, go.
Yeah, will the reviewers be experts in experimental research? Because I know that it's very hard to find proper reviewers. Sometimes it's our papers are sent to even PhD students like me. So I wonder that how much we can trust the reviewers' comments.
All right. Well, I say I think that the risk is no bigger or smaller than the risk you have currently, right?
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the instructions to the reviewers will be quite different. So the first thing, Mona, is you got to make it through Robert and me, right? Mm-hmm. And my prediction is I know my methods pretty well. So yeah, if you make it through me, then you need to trust that I will find 2 or 3 competent people in that area of expertise. And so I'm sure tourism management is in the same situation. We have a gigantic pool of reviewers who we can come back. And because we are handling it, not an associate editor, we tap them directly and say, look, this is all we want you to judge the method. We may say different things to different people. We may say, you're a content expert. You need to tell us if that's really an important question to ask. And hey, you are a field experiment expert or a survey research expert. It actually doesn't mean that all this needs to be is about field experiments. You need to do whatever method is suitable to answer your question, not the most complicated method. Yeah. Sorry, I'll pass over to Robert and Kathy. I'm talking too much.
Oh, no problem.
Thank you, sir.
I think one of the things that we're most proud of, Kathy and I, is tourism management has a fantastic pool of reviewers. Extremely talented, extremely methodologically strong. And also that I understand that there's some concern that, well, there may be not enough reviewers for certain methods, but thanks to people like you, the young generation is also growing, and we are seeing that increasingly that we are seeing new blood and who can handle different kinds of new cutting edge research methods. So I understand the concern, but we're very confident that this process will be duly handled.
Okay, so is there any chance that our paper gets rejected by the reviewers in the first stage?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Huh.
So think of the first stage as a normal review that you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. That's how it's going to work. The first stage is the tough one. The second one is much easier. If you make it through stage 1, you're basically published unless you don't do what you promised, right? So the hard work happens in stage 1.
Thank you.
And I would also add, kind of repeat what I just mentioned, that one of the beauty of this is that you now can take some risks, and you are allowed to do some courageous research that you are not always like kind of confined that I have to find the significant results. So I guess the audience is being warmed up. Now we have a lot of questions in the chat. Also, I think Dr. Zhang, you're raising your hand.
Yep.
Please.
Thank you, Robert. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Cassie and Sarah. I'm Sophie Zhang from Beijing International Studies University.
Lovely to meet you, Sophie. It's nice to see your face.
Me too. Well, I have a question about this new format to submit paper. I think this is such an innovative approach to encourage risky like research designs. But how about a mixed method design? For example, usually we design research, but can be divided into different studies. For example, I divide I propose like a qualitative research at stage 1, and then I want to like further the study by quantitative study after receiving the results from qualitative design. So should I submit this paper with the qualitative study results, or I can propose like mixed method design at the beginning?
You have to do the whole thing.
Okay. So I need to propose the qualitative and quantitative design at the beginning, right?
Yes, or if you wish, I mean, if I were you, I would do the qual. If you're saying that the quant design depends on your qual findings, well, just do the qual, right? And then put that in as informing your stage 1 application.
Okay, got you. And the other question about the multi-stage design, it's like I probably I gonna propose like 3 study design, and study 1 I can propose in very detailed format. But the study 2, I have to wait a little bit on the results from study 1 to see how I gonna further like research, further explore the same research research question. So what should I do? Should I propose like 3-stage design at the beginning, or and a stage 1 in a very detailed format, and stage 2 and 3 I can do it like in a now the detailed way?
The short answer here, if I may, Sarah, you can totally correct me. The short answer is that not all studies are applicable to registry report. Only a certain group, certain type of studies are going to be designed perfectly for registry report. So it is possible that you multi-methods, multi-stage study, it turned out that, well, maybe you should just submit as a traditional paper. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
I agree with Robert, and I want to add, I've noticed, I don't know how Kathy and Robert feel about this, but I have seen some kind of explosion of multi-study papers.
Yep.
But it's not exciting to me. Everyone thinks that it increases the rigor. To me, it doesn't. If the question is boring, you can do 10 studies and it doesn't make the paper better, right? So I think you also don't need to, there is no requirement to say it's got to be a five study paper, right? Like, what's your question? I mean, if you're not expecting you need a follow-up question, just put it in. If it throws up more questions, you could probably discuss that in stage 2 if you wanted to add another investigation.
Cannot agree more. That's, there is a Journal of Management paper published fairly recently talking about that. The whole publication, and particularly the review process, is not just a matter of adding more studies, lengthening the paper, making it super wordy and lengthy, and then just because added so many studies, then automatically the quality is better. No, it's not the case at all. So in many cases, a mixed method study or multi-phase study is not necessarily better than a single study. Yeah.
Okay.
Just Kathy's already responded to the bibliometric or systematic literature review. My response is exactly the same. So we will generally not publish lit reviews. And again, we have seen a skyrocketing increase of lit reviews. I think it's a consequence of publication by thesis by publication. So every student who does a lit review for their thesis thinks it's going to be a paper. That's not how it works. So we will only publish lit reviews by experts with all due respect, because citation analysis gives you very little insight about what's happened over the past 30 years. I'm not saying junior people can't do a good lit review, but most of what we see are these citation bibliometric analyses, and they're generally shallow and provide very little insight. And so we won't publish them anyway.
Yeah,
We've
I
got
would-
two more
I'm
questions. Sorry?
Yeah, no, just totally agree. And
No, yeah.
review for the sake of review is not sufficient.
Yeah.
Review with conceptual development will add more contribution to the literature, yes.
Just quickly before we go to the others, sometimes the method needs to be adjusted. Yes, absolutely, Dennis, I agree. It's a very risky format to take. And that's why I'm saying I don't think it's a simpler format at all, right? But I will tell you my example. I haven't personally thought about it as an author, but if you know my work, a lot of my work are actual field experiments in hotels. Well, trust me, half of them fail. And when they fail, I can't publish them. And it's a real shame, because if I can't publish them, someone else is going to have the same idea and waste their time trying the same thing again, right? So I think that illustrates really neatly where there is real benefit for the author. I think there's not always a benefit. I really don't. And yes, it's the harder path to take. And yes, I mean, maybe we will accept if you make a change, but a priori, you have to assume we will not accept the modification, right? So if you walk in saying, I'm going to do the stage 1 because they're going to negotiate with me at stage 2, that is not how the model works. So by default, it's got to be identical. Robert, did you want to add something?
Well, I just, you may recall that earlier I mentioned there is some kind of a questionable research practice. One of that is called harking. Harking is that hypothesis after results known. So there are a great deal of people, there are a great deal of efforts trying to manipulate the results and make it significant. And this is why we do a registry report, is trying to avoid this kind of questionable behavior and try to mitigate some of this the issues. But for when we talk about, like, there is some kind of adjustment in this process, I think that, as Sarah mentioned, I think you have to work under the assumption that you're going to strictly follow this original plan, which means that it's kind of stress the importance of meticulous pre-planning.
All right, we will go back to the questions that are written. We might move to Charlene now and to Sung Kyung in a second, because we have hands up. Let's go.
Thanks, Sarah and Robert, for the wonderful presentation about the pre-register report. I am the PhD students from the CUHK. So I have a question related to pre-registration, but now about the register report. So typically in psychology study, people also do pre-registration. So basically they pre-register their study and then collect the data and then report the data. So my question is, do TN and ATR also value this kind of pre-registration in paper?
Well, I will go first, then Sarah can may or may not have the same opinion. But in case you read the TM Viewpoint paper, you probably know that I'm a big fan of pre-registration. I think it's part of the movement called open science. It's a part of the efforts to regain the credibility of science. So I think that's not only in psychology, but in many other disciplines, pre-registration has become a common practice. So I think that we certainly appreciate people who pre-register their findings, and at this point it's not mandatory, but we certainly respect the people's choice, authors' choice in pre-register their study or not.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Totally agree.
Thank you.
Sung Kyung,
Okay, thank you very much. Hello.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. This is Sung Kyung Choi from Institute of Science, Tokyo. Thank you very much for presentation. Actually, I have a simple question, and maybe it's because my background is from engineering and science. So I'm the only one studying about tourism in our institute, actually. But because of that, actually, I tried to submit in tourism management once in the past, but I got rejection at that time because the comment was saying that it is data-driven, naturally data-driven approach, and yet there is more advanced enhancements should be made in theoretical framework or theoretical contributions. So as from science and engineering, it is sometimes quite challenging to find exact theories to connect the natures that findings that we want to find in the data-driven approaches. So how do you think about this point and handling this aspect in registered reports? Is it still necessary to somehow connect with theoretical background in the very quantitative data-driven approaches? So this is my question. Yes.
Thank you. Do you want to go first, Robert? I see your...
No, Sarah, please.
No,
Ladies
go
first.
for it. Do you have an answer ready to go?
Well, I think number one, that if you think about the first phase of the review process, it value the quality of research question, it value the process and the rationale you put together your hypothesis. So because of that, I think philosophically, a registry report study is no different from other studies. It needs to have a great question. It needs to be theoretically based, intellect and intellectually inspiring. So what I think, I can't really comment on your particular paper because I don't really know that, but generally speaking, that's the analysis for the sake of analysis, it's just, purely like data-driven paper could kind of be weak in the quality of the ideas, or at least the presentation of the research question and the idea. So in this sense, again, I think that having this registry reports category doesn't necessarily change the journal stand in this particular case.
Yeah, again, I totally agree. And I think your question is not really specific to the registered reports. I think it's about the aims and scope of the journal. So Annals and Tourism Management both have a focus on theory development. So theory is quite critical. But there's other journals like Annals of Tourism Research Empirical Insights, Journal of Vacation Marketing. So there's other journals, they are openly, unapologetically empirical. So that's where you send your things. So it's not so much the format of the publication, it's the orientation and the focus of the journal that you need to look after. Yeah? I personally am a big fan of empirical research. I think it takes all sorts of research to create knowledge, but you need to find the right outlet.
Thank you very much.
Good. Should we go back to a few of the written ones?
Sure.
If you submit the proposal for the registered report and it gets rejected, will it be rejected again if I submit it as a full manuscript? That's a really good question. So my answer would be, the thing is, our algorithm in our brain is always the same, right? So it's very hard to imagine, like the decisions I made are not depending on the weather, or you know what I mean? So if it's my brain again, it's very likely it'll get accepted. So that's not a punishment by the system. It's just if I didn't see the value of what you're doing when you submitted a stage one, or if my reviewers didn't see the value, it's a bit hard to imagine they would suddenly see the value once the results are provided. So I think naturally you would assume you'd have a very bad chance, but I do not know the answer to the question whether you would be rejected based on duplication or resubmission. Do you know the answer to that, Robert? I'm not sure.
No, I think similar to you, that I think the question actually, part of the answer is dependent on why your register report idea is rejected. And if it's because of the quality of the idea, the rationale of the hypothesis, and something like that, and if you are able to substantially, I mean literally substantially improve it, and it might be possible that you can have a different chance with the full manuscript. But if you think that, well, just I try my luck with the register report, now I have the data, let me try again, I would not encourage that.
Yeah, that's right. And there was a follow-up, or was there not a follow-up? Oh, no, sorry, that's it. How long will it take? Okay, so no, it's not shorter. It's basically the same thing. Two people asked about that. So absolutely. So imagine stage one is like the normal review. It goes to reviewers, you respond. It could be 5 stages, we just don't know how long it takes for everyone to make a decision that they're happy for it to be published. So stage one is the kind of review process you're already familiar with. I don't expect it to be any faster or slower than the usual, because the delay in the review process doesn't come from the result section, right? It comes, why? Because all of you are too busy to review quickly, right? That's just how it works, because we are both authors and reviewers. What we give is what we get. So the delay is not in what you're submitting. It's recruiting reviewers that are competent and then them finding the time to do it. So I don't see a reason why it would be faster. Robert, any other views?
I think as a well-trained researchers, we tend to speak by the data, by empirical evidence. So maybe 1 year later, we can tell you with evidence and data, like how many days this will run. But yes, Sarah has absolutely nailed it. That's, I think that's the process is not necessarily longer or shorter than the traditional review for the first round. Yeah.
And then we have a question about what's the perfect study. Well, I've given you one example. I think the classic example is where it's worth doing is if your study is so incredibly labor intensive. So my field experiments are extremely labor intensive. I'm going to a real hotel. I'm changing something in the hotel. I'm installing devices to measure if behavior change, right? It is heartbreaking after all that effort if nobody wants to publish it. So I think those are the classic cases where you want to say that's where it's worth it, right? If I'm going to invest so much time and money, and I know that my chance of getting a null result getting published is 0, that to me is the classic case where you can really benefit from the registered report model.
And if you ask me, I would imagine like if there's a study that's the idea just so exciting, but I also know it's so risky that it's entirely possible that I will not get significant results. But regardless, it's a great question and it's intellectually exciting. But I know that, that potentially there will be a risky review. Then I think register report is your choice. It's a better option because it's designed precisely to encourage this kind of high risk kind of research.
If I can follow up on something Robert said before and just reaffirm, you cannot use, I see another bit strange trend where people just throw something at journals and then kind of use the journal as a coaching mechanism. That is not very appreciated, right? So they throw something at us that's not formatted and it's full of typos. So then they expect me to go back and say, fix the typos. Well, why should I, right? It's disrespectful to me and to my reviewers. So the temptation here to do that with the registered report, of course, is high. Let's just run it past them and see if they like it, yeah? I would not advise that you do that. I think you want to take stage one really, really seriously. So it's got to really be a fully polished manuscript where the results are missing. All right? It can't just be a pitch. Any more questions? Any other questions unrelated to registered reports? You still have us for, let's see, 16 minutes. You just missed one. No more questions? Robert, anything you would like to add before we go? Oh, there's Kathy.
Not really. Just, I would encourage everyone to consider this option and, be more knowledgeable about, the whole process and trends that, contemporary science is moving forward. There are all different kinds of new trends, new options for publishing, for conducting science. Very exciting. And I think that for our young generation of scholars, you need to be aware of that. You need to be informed of that. In the meantime, if you know this is a process, we are all learning. Okay, hold on. What is okay? We are all learning together, and and then there will be you know, we welcome all the suggestions and feedback during this process. Sarah, you have some concluding remarks, I guess?
Oh, well, I
Please.
guess I just wanted to say, the whole thing, and I think this is really maybe the big picture we can zoom out to. The whole thing is about improving knowledge creation, right? It's about less fiddling with data and more asking really important questions and using the best possible design to answer them. So this is all to improve the quality of tourism research we do. That's its mission. And so if we can all collectively, authors and journals, leverage it to that purpose, I think that's kind of the most satisfying outcome of this development.
Okay,
Thank you
cool.
very much. May I ask, if we submit a registration report with only 2 studies, but end up connecting 4, would that be considered consistent? Experimental studies have unconnected, yeah. Good question. I think if the 2 studies make it through, I would imagine we would still read stage 2 with 2 extra studies, wouldn't we, Robert?
I think the burden is why you decided to add that 3, 4, 5 experiments. If you have a compelling rationale, we would consider it. You know, that's all I can say at this stage.
Yeah, I would see it the same way. As you can see, there's going to be a lot of variations over the years, but you see that Robert, I, and Kathy agree very much on the principles. This is all about the principles. And if you have complied with stage 1 promises and added something, you know, in principle, I'd say we wouldn't have a problem with that.
Thank
Happy
you so
holidays.
much for organizing
Bye-bye.
this wonderful meeting.